Hi, I'm Carrie Patrick, your host for Eye on St. Lucie. History and the study of events is a great exploration that provides many gifts. It gives us opportunities to reflect and to learn so that moving forward, we are armed with greater knowledge, better understanding, deeper compassion, and the capacity to make better choices, wiser decisions. Recently, 2 schools had the opportunity to hear first-hand accounts from individuals who survived a most tragic persecution, a time in history known as the Holocaust, which literally, from the Greek meaning, translates to sacrifice by fire. The Holocaust was the systematic, bureaucratic persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. The Nazis, who came to power in Germany in January of 1933, believed that Germans were racially superior and that the Jewish people were deemed inferior. Well, fortunately, not everyone believed that. Some of the Jewish people were hidden, some escaped, and some survived by other means to tell their story. Honoring children of the Holocaust has grown into an annual event at Oak Hammock K-8 school each year. The hallways are filled with studies in art, in prose, and research that honors the message of survivors to learn about our past, to understand, to appreciate, to document, and to share the message of survivors, to protect and to honor future generations. And each year, child survivors, hidden children of the Holocaust, a group from the Boynton Beach and West Palm Beach area travel to Oak Hammock K-8 in Port St. Lucie with at least 20 members from this organization. Mr. Norman Frajman, the group's president, and others share their emotional and moving stories of concentration camp survival during World War II with middle school students who link their learning about the Holocaust in their classroom studies to the authentic experiences of their campus guests.
What is the purpose of our visit to this or any other school? It is simply that we are trying to leave a legacy for the younger generation, so this catastrophe known as the Holocaust does not repeat itself. It never happened in history of mankind as to what atrocities and hatred is capable of producing. And this is what we survivors are trying to leave behind. So just people will have tolerance toward one another. Because a lot of these deeds stem from one thing and one word, a 4-letter word: hate. And in my speeches, I always say that this 4-letter word is so easily replaceable by another 4-letter word: love. Same amount of space and all, and a different meaning. It's not genocidal. The tragedy of it is that yesterday it was directed against one kind of people, namely of the Jewish faith. Today it could be against Christians, tomorrow Muslims, Buddhists, Jehovah's Witnesses. Any organized religion is vulnerable to it. And people do not realize that some people don't learn that we live on a small planet. There is no room for this. We have to make our lives easier, not intertwined with hatred.
And these heroic Holocaust survivors share their emotional and moving stories of survival with students in an effort to recount history for future generations.
I was about your age. I was trapped under the evil Nazi occupation in my hometown that I was born in, which is Warsaw, the capital of Poland, where before the war I had a wonderful life, parents, sister, great extended family, and then suddenly from the beginning of the Second World War, which hit us on September the 1st of 1939, and until the end in 1945, I experienced bombing, arrests, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising under the leadership of a 23-year-old student who really recruited 15, 16-year-old students trying to hold the mightiest army at this time under the sun. They were trying to prove to the world that the inhabitants of the Warsaw Ghetto did not go like sheep to a slaughter. It was a suicidal mission. They knew they were not going to win, but the point was proven. Well, they resolved that they will not be taken to their deaths as victims, but as brave fighters. The battle lasted longer than any resistance of many countries with strong armies. Of course, after close to 6 weeks, they lost and were destroyed. After the ghetto was defeated, we, the remaining Jewish people, were arrested by the Nazis, taken in overpacked cattle cars to all various extermination camps. I wound up in one of them. I want to share with you that there were literally thousands of concentration camps during the occupation, but there were only 6 camps designated for the specific reason of killing people, of simply murdering them. And this is what makes it so outstanding in the history of mankind. It never happened before. You know, there was an Inquisition during the 14th century, and there was Queen Isabella. King Ferdinand issued a decree that everybody in this country of Spain must convert to Christianity. If not, we're going to burn you at stake. Well, the point of it is that a choice was given, but the Germans was unrelenting. He never recognized this fact. Could have been 5th or 6th generation back that someone in their family converted to a different religion, and they traced back. They had Jewish blood in you. You are a Jew, and threw him right into the ghetto with us to eventually lose their lives. Well, my trip to Majdanek, to that camp, with the showers, really guest chambers. I was picked, fortunately, for forced labor, and inhuman conditions, brutal work, starvation, and torture was our life in those camps. Unfortunately, my dear mother and only sister, they were gassed as soon as they arrived. This I learned much later, and I felt completely beaten and life became meaningless. But somehow being transferred to a few other labor camps, and with the devoted help of one of my friends, I survived those camps, and lived long enough to be liberated by the Soviet troops. And this was the day of my rebirth.
Now, Mr. Louis Snyder recounts his early years in Belgium and France to high school students at St. Lucie West Centennial High School. He explains that his family's trek to France did not turn out to be the journey to a safe haven that they expected.
I found myself enmeshed in the shenanigans of the Holocaust. For the sole reason that I happen to be Jewish. And yet that has carried over in many other respects. I'm kind of lost a little bit, forgive me. I was born in Antwerp, Belgium in 1934. That seems like a long time ago. The war hit Belgium in 1940 by the marching German troops coming in. And in an attempt to get away from that, the first attempt was to try to get to Dunkirk, from which there was supposed to be an evacuation of people who wanted to leave. Unfortunately, the roads were blocked. The means of getting there were totally impossible. So we got stuck in France. Now we thought we'd be nice and safe in France. But the French were not very cooperative. The first thing they did is they got involved in issuing papers, identification. What you're looking at right now is an ID card that was issued to my mother. You'll see prominently, you'll see prominently stamped in the word Juif or Jew on the card so that it could be easily isolated from the general population. Now, we thought we'd be safe in France, notwithstanding the issuance of special papers that identified you as Jews, but it was not like that at all. What we did not know is that the French government, the Vichy government, negotiated with the Germans a very nice deal, that they would round up the Jews on behalf of the Germans, and as a reward, they would get to keep the property of the Jews that they turn over. And so in 1942 came the roundups. 1942, the French gendarmes went out to get any Jews that they could get their hands on, to turn them over to the Germans for deportation eventually to the German concentration camps. But I'm kind of skipping things because when we first got to France, the question is, how are we going to survive in France even? And there, my parents put me in school, and I promptly learned French and was doing very well. And in fact, I was received a little reward for being a good student. But the day after I received the reward as a good student, a bunch of guys, local people, walked into the classroom. They grabbed the teacher and beat him up. They came to me, ripped the little rosette that had been given as a reward to me, and screaming at me, "Sale juif, dirty Jew," and threw me out of the classroom to make sure that I would not come back to the school. That was my first exposure personally to violent anti-Semitism by the French.
Mr. Snyder's refuge during the war was in a monastery, and as food was in short supply, he and others searched for food despite the possibility of mines.
During the war years, especially during the years in Italy, we ran short of food very often. And interestingly, the fact that not only the general population, but it even affected the German soldiers. And they tried to raid whatever food they could get from the civilians and vice versa. Which brings me to a rather funny story that I tell about food. It was during the winter of 1944, and things were really tough. Most of the kids in the monastery had gone home for the vacation for Christmas, and only about 5 of us were still in the monastery. We decided that things were so bad that we were going to raid the German commissary and steal from the Germans the food. So 4 of us, we grabbed a sled because it was winter and it was an easy thing for carrying anything, made our way to the area of the German commissary, went under the barbed wire, made our way into the commissary itself, and there we found a bunch of barrels of food. And we thought, gee, that's wonderful, but now we're going to have plenty of food. We loaded a couple of barrels on our sled, little barrels, got back, and now we had to get through the minefield and barbed wire again to get out of there with the food. Well, we figured we'll roll the barrel, and if it sets off a mine, well, the barrel's going to explode, but we're going to be fine. P.S. Nothing happened. We got the food, brought it back to the monastery, and said, now we're going to have a feast. Open up barrel number 1, and what is it? It's filled with sauerkraut. Open up barrel number 2, again, it's just sauerkraut. Barrel number 3, finally, more sauerkraut. Well, I got news for you. I hate the idea of sauerkraut these days. To this day, it kind of bothers me. But seriously, being in a monastery was quite an experience, and the monastery was constantly raided by the Germans. They were looking for the possibility of American flyers or British flyers that had been shut down, because the bishop would give us asylum. We would hide them in monasteries throughout northern Italy. Well, I'll never forget one particular raid of the monastery when I was in. I didn't have time to get out of the way, which is what I usually did. What the priest had arranged is that in the basement there were barrels on which they marinated apples. They had one barrel, a big barrel that was empty, and I would hide under that barrel whenever the German troops approached the monastery. Well, one time I couldn't make it, so instead they hustled me into the bishop's personal quarters, and there they put me in the upper shelf of an armoire, hoping that I'd just be quiet while the Germans were searching the place. Well, I'll never forget, because I was sitting there, lying there on the shelf, hoping that things would be nice and quiet, and when I heard the German patrol walking into the bishop's quarters, and screaming at the bishop, "Where is the Jew?" I figured, well, they found me. I got so scared I peed in my pants as they were screaming at him. Next thing I heard is a couple of shots, and I thought that they had killed the bishop, and I thought they were going to kill me next. But instead they had just fired a couple of shots in the air to kind of scare him, and he stood firm and never giving me away, never disclosing that I was in the armoire. But life was an absolute horror for many years.
I'm Carrie Patrick, and as we close this show, today's sobering broadcast of Eye on St. Lucie, I thank our WLX-TV team and our school-based videography teams who supported the broadcast of their programs. We are going to close on a portion with a number that is led by Brian Hosey and introduced by Rabbi Bruce Benson, who brings forward some staggering statistics about the number of children under the age of 16 who were impacted by the Holocaust, coupled with a message of strength. And remember, please tune in to WLX-TV for both of these Holocaust programs in their entirety, or we also invite you to watch them on demand on our social media outlets. And as always, please keep your eye on St. Lucie.
2727, 2727, actually dot 2727. Again, if we filled this room, which holds 540, 550 people, 2,727 times, and at the end of every seating, took people out that door and killed them. That is the number of people under the age of 16 who died in the Holocaust. Now we have a number to start from. Over 1.5 million teenagers and younger, and that does not count children under the age of 6, because they didn't count them. I was asked to talk about myself. There's nothing about me that's all that important. I'll tell you a couple of things which lead into this. I was born clinically deaf. I'm the only rabbi in America with a Grammy nomination. Anything is possible. We can defeat hate. We can defeat ugliness. And we can all be what we choose to be by putting our eyes on where we want to go. I was born clinically deaf. I learned how to play music by listening with the record player up against the side of my head. Eventually, I conducted the Oakland and Berkeley symphony orchestras, traveled around the country with the rock and roll band, have a Grammy nomination, and have a song on YouTube that's been seen 632,000 times. What you're about to hear is astonishing. A, because of the quality of what your student colleagues have produced. B, the fact that their teacher was chuckled at by other music teachers who said, "You've got to be out of your mind. This piece is not easy," and it is not. I've conducted symphony orchestras. This piece is a bear. Kaddish comes from the word to sanctify or to make holy. The idea of this piece is that we recite, the Jewish community recites this prayer as a remembrance of the dead, but it never speaks of death. It only speaks of the grace and blessing and strength of God, who gave us a life that hopefully wouldn't be wasted. The piece you're about to hear was premised musically on the idea that as the Jews, 50% of the Jews of Europe, a lot, 97% of the gypsy population of Europe was destroyed. Everyone that they could definably notate as gay, lesbian, or alternative was murdered for no other reason than being a tad different. You're going to hear from a man who did more by the time he was your age than you will do in your lives. He survived a train that was bombed from the air. Almost everyone in his train car, not the long train, the car he was in, was killed in front of his eyes. He was 10. I don't care if you are black, white, green, yellow, or tan. That's an issue for every one of us. The Kaddish prayer does not, however, speak of death. It only speaks of the strength and power of God. As you listen to this piece, I beg you to listen musically to how it evolves and the strength. We know that the Jews, as they were marched into the gas chambers, recited this prayer louder and louder and louder. Listen to the music as it carries you to a place, thank you, God, you will never know. Piece of music can take us there. The Kaddish. Yet Gadal, Yet Kadash, Shemei Rabban, Be'olma Divrach Chirutei, Yamlich Malchutei, B'chayechon Uv'yomechon V'chayei Techol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agalah Uv'izman Kariv, B'imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach L'Olam U'L'Omer Maya, Yitbarach V'yishtabach, V'yitba'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar V'yithalev V'yithalal, Shmei Dikutsha, B'richu, Le'elam Min Kol Birchata V'shirata, Tushbechata V'nechemata, Da'amiram Be'olma V'imru. Amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru. Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, U'ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru. Amen.